Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If.
Chapter 3 Interlude. An evening of introductions. Welcome home, Haruki-san. Blinking tiredly, Haruki turned to see a familiar blonde bound up to him, blue eyes wide, a bright smile already splitting his features. Only the faintest traces of uncertainty lurked just under the surface of that expression, and the two quickly dissipated when Haruki openly smiled down at the boy. Hello, duckling. I didn't expect to see you so soon. Did you pass your genin test? Naruto beamed up at him. Yup. Kakashi-sensei wanted us to learn teamwork, but we didn't know that at first, and we all tried to attack him to get the bells. 'Cause that's what we had to do to pass the test before lunch, but none of us could, and then I was tied to a tree stump. Haruki reached out and ruffled the boy's hair as Naruto broke off for air. Breathe, Naruto-kun. What happened next? Naruto grinned sheepishly up at him but quickly launched back into the story. So I was tied to the tree stump as punishment while Sasuke and Sakura-chan got to eat the lunches. Sensei told them they couldn't feed me and then he left, but he came back and passed us when Sasuke and Sakura-chan gave me some of their lunches. The blonde frowned a little and peered curiously up at the redhead. He told us that those who break the rules are scum, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum. He passed us because the three of us stuck up for each other. How did you know he would? Haruki's smile faded, absently withdrawing his hand. Perhaps he had revealed a little too much that day. I didn't really, he spoke carefully. But teams can't work well together without teamwork. Most senseis would want to see their genin team have some ability in working together. Naruto still looked a little puzzled, but his expression cleared in the next moment, accepting this explanation easily. Well, I think what you said before you left really helped. Sasuke-tem's being less of a tem and Sakura-chan is being nicer to me. But Kakashi-sensei gets this weird look on his face sometimes. The blonde frowned in concentration and somehow managed to look confused and ticked off at the same time. He also looked a bit like he had been concussed, and Haruki neatly tucked away the amusement threatening to make itself known. And he's only been around an hour late every day. Haruki considered this for a moment. Had he really made that much of a difference? He had only said a few words, but if Kakashi had taken notice of this to the extent that even Naruto had noticed Kakashi's interest, and Sarutobi had even warned him that he would most likely be accosted by the copy nin sometime soon, then the team dynamics of Team 7 must have really changed. All the better, Haruki decided, running a hand through his hair. Team 7 needed to create strong bonds before the Chunin exams, especially Sasuke. Well, maybe I'll see your sensei around soon, Haruki replied aloud. He sounds interesting. I'd like to meet him. That wasn't actually the entire truth. The last time he had seen Hatake Kakashi had been over 2 years ago on the battlefield. The man had eventually been overwhelmed by enemy forces where he had been stationed and his Sharingan had burned out. He had fallen at the hands of Madara himself, but not before taking down an entire encampment of Odo nin single-handedly. Kakashi had died in his arms, and his last words to Haruki while choking on his own blood had been an apology for failing to save the redhead's genin team. Kakashi's death had hit Konoha hard and Haruki even harder. The copy nin had died with regrets, and Haruki had lost another of the handful of people he had been particularly close to. To see him now, alive and healthy and still unmarred by the bloodiest war in all of shinobi history, but not his Kakashi, would hurt. This Kakashi didn't know him, didn't trust him, not like his time's Kakashi whom he had been able to talk to and confide in, and vice versa. In front of him, Naruto was already nodding enthusiastically. Sensei will be coming by tonight. For some reason, he really wants to meet you. Haruki frowned. I guess that's alright, he allowed reluctantly. But I should probably get some rest now. I haven't slept in days. What time is he coming? Naruto rocked back on his heels. He said 8. I don't know if that means he's actually going to arrive at 8 though. Haruki considered this before shrugging and moving to his apartment door. Doesn't matter. I'll be up before then. Just knock on my door when he gets here, alright? Naruto nodded, unlocking his own apartment. Sure. You must be tired after your mission. Sorry for keeping you out here. Haruki waved a dismissive hand as he stepped into his apartment. Don't worry about it, duckling. I'll see you later. He smiled at the wave he received in return before closing the door behind him and stifling a yawn. He didn't really want to sleep. He hadn't wanted to sleep for a long time, but he had felt tired for just as long. He couldn't physically remember the last time his body had been free of the heavy weariness that insisted on making itself at home in his very bones. With a heavy sigh, Haruki tossed his scrolls on the coffee table and placed his shuriken, kunai, and katana aside. Not bothering to change out of his ninja wear or make the trip to the bedroom, the redhead simply dropped onto the couch, throwing an arm over his eyes but making sure he would still have a clear view of the front door. A short nap should be all right. If he was lucky, the nightmares would leave him alone for a little while. Hokage-sama, you wished to speak to me. Sarutobi glanced up with a smile as Hyuga Hiyashi stepped into the office, quietly closing the door behind him. The Sandame quickly activated the privacy seals before standing and coming out from around his desk. I did, Sarutobi nodded. I will get right to the point as we may be short on time. You recall the Hyuga affair 9 years ago, of course. Hiyashi's already stony countenance shuddered completely. Of course. The affirmation was clipped and cold, but Sarutobi paid it no mind. 8 years ago, the Sandame continued carefully. He and Hizashi had worked out an abridged version of the recent events before summoning Hiyashi to the tower. I sent a spy to Kumo to make sure nothing like it would ever happen again. A week ago, that spy came back, bringing with him some very startling news. Hiyashi stiffened at this. Will Kumo try again? Sarutobi quickly shook his head in the negative. No, it isn't that. It seems Kumo has been keeping a secret of great magnitude from the rest of the world and, after my spy relayed the information to me, I sent him back out to retrieve that secret. He has just returned with him earlier today. He paused here, glancing at his private office. I believe showing you would be best. Hizashi-san. Out of the corner of his eye, Sarutobi watched the Hyuga clan head freeze, eyes widening when the small office's door opened and Hizashi stepped out, face calm but an almost amused gleam in his eyes, mixed with a healthy amount of concern as the two brothers stared at each other. It has been a while, Ni-san. Hizashi hesitated when Hiyashi made no move to even speak, only continuing to stare at him, his face having paled considerably. The younger twin glanced wryly at the Hokage. Perhaps you should have told him first, after all. Sarutobi shrugged unrepentantly. He rarely ever saw any of the stiff clan heads acting out of character and he needed his own way of keeping himself entertained, Hokage or no. Ni-san, it's me. Are you all right? Hizashi stepped closer and Hiyashi finally seemed to pull himself together, rounding on the Hokage with a mixture of confusion and anger blazing in his eyes. What is the meaning of this, Hokage-sama? The clan head bit out, jaw tight. This is not my brother. Hizashi died 9 years ago. Sarutobi raised his hand in a calming gesture and briefly considered calling Haruki back to explain but decided against it. The redhead was still too thin in his eyes and the shadows that he had seen on the man's face when Haruki first arrived had only deepened. He hoped some rest would do him good. Hiyashi-san, I assure you, this is your brother. My spy happens to be adept at fuinjutsu and has assured me that the coffin your brother was found in had a life suspension seal placed on it. He managed to break the seal and bring Hizashi-san back safely only hours ago. Kumo managed to save your brother's life after realizing what the caged bird seal would do upon his death and has kept him alive but unconscious ever since while letting the rest of the world believe him to be dead. Hiyashi took this in with a heavy frown as he glanced between Sarutobi and his brother. Seeing this, Hizashi stepped forward again and bared his throat, letting the older of the two see the obvious scar marring his skin. I am real, Ni-san, Hizashi reassured softly. And I am back. Hiyashi continued staring at his twin, eyeing the scar before glancing at the curse seal that, without a hit, stood out clearly on Hizashi's forehead. The clan head almost stumbled forward a step, unable to look away as if mesmerized. What was the last thing you asked me to do before you took my place 9 years ago? The man's voice was nearly a whisper. Hizashi smiled ever so slightly. I asked you to tell Neji why I chose to take your place. He paused in thought. Though knowing you, you probably have not done so out of some sort of misplaced guilt. He was cut off suddenly when Hiyashi did stumble forward this time, one hand hovering in front of his younger twin as if afraid that touching him would prove everything to be nothing but a genjutsu. Mere seconds later, the hand reached out and closed tightly around Hazashi's arm, dragging the startled man into a desperate hug. Several feet away, Sarutobi turned to look out the window to give the two men some semblance of privacy. A smile broke out on his face. It had been a long time since Hiyashi had shown any outward emotion. He ignored the quiet murmurs behind him as the two Hyugas exchanged words and went over the plan in his head instead. The sound of someone politely clearing their throat behind him caused Sarutobi to turn back, his smile lingering when he saw Hiyashi standing with his hands at his side once more, Hazashi a half step beside him. Both were composed again, though far more relaxed, and an invisible weight seemed to have been lifted from the Hyuga clan head's shoulders. Could you please explain the circumstances, Hokage-sama? Hiyashi restarted, voice somehow warmer while still retaining the neutral formality he typically used. Sarutobi nodded, moving back around his desk. Obviously, the fact that I sent one of my shinobi into Kumo cannot be revealed. My spy came up with a plan that should cover this truth, and we, Hazashi-san and I, believe that this is the version we should give the council. Quickly, Sarutobi recounted the plan Haruki had come up with, smoothing over the rougher parts. Hazashi-san will slip back outside the village perhaps 5 to 6 days after Haruki-kun is finished. If we time it correctly, no one will suspect anything. Hiyashi mulled this over silently when Sarutobi finished, glancing briefly at his brother again as he had been every 2 minutes since Hazashi had shown himself. The other two occupants of the room politely pretended not to notice, though Hazashi made the effort to stare back reassuringly whenever Hiyashi looked over. It is a good plan, Hiyashi admitted before glancing around the office. Where is this spy now? I dismissed him for the day, Sarutobi revealed. He deserves the rest. What is his name? Hiyashi persisted. Kazama Haruki, Hazashi provided helpfully. A Junin. Hiyashi frowned. I have never heard of him. Sarutobi quickly took over again when Hazashi shot a subtle glance at him. Haruki-kun hasn't been back in Konoha in 8 years, and before that, he was one of the newer Junins. All his reports to me have been through his summons. But he showed an aptitude for infiltration, so I sent him into Kumo on this long-term mission. I've personally erased his files so he wouldn't be traced back to Konoha if he were ever caught. As it is, he's done a wonderful job and even brought back an important figure of our village. Hiyashi tilted his head thoughtfully, looking between his brother and the Hokage as if suspecting something, but Sarutobi kept his face bland and Hazashi blinked calmly back at his brother. The clan head accepted this knowledge with a simple nod after a moment, though Sarutobi had a hidden suspicion that Hiyashi didn't entirely believe the story he had spun. Very well, Hiyashi continued without giving voice to any thoughts he had on the matter. If you believe this to be the best course of action, I will accept this plan. I assume Hazashi will stay here in the meantime. Sarutobi nodded, mildly relieved. Hiyashi was on the council and he might have been inclined to inform at least a few other members or decide that revenge against Kumo immediately would be the best course of action. As if sensing his thoughts, Hiyashi elaborated after a contemplative moment, you have said that this plan was suggested by Kazama-san. I will not accuse you of anything, Hokage-sama, but there is something not quite right about your description of this spy. I keep an eye on all shinobi above genin level and I have never heard of this man in my life. But it seems as if you feel he needs to be protected from the council, and while this plan gives Konoha an upper hand against Kumogakure, it also conveniently gives Kazama-san a concrete standing in Konoha. If this is so, I will abide by this plan. Sarutobi stared back at Hiyashi impassively, a glimmer of well-hidden curiosity prompting him to question, if this were true, you would not question Haruki-kun. Hiyashi arched an eyebrow. Hokage-sama, you seem to place quite a lot of trust in this Kazama-san. He paused and Sarutobi inclined his head in agreement. That would be my only concern. If you trust that he would not bring any harm to this village, then who am I to call out the man who has given me back my brother? Sarutobi blinked, understanding flashing through him as he nodded thoughtfully. Hiyashi now considered himself indebted to Haruki. He wondered what the redhead would think of that. Having a clan head and essentially an entire clan standing behind you could be a powerful weapon. All right then, Sarutobi spoke briskly now, nodding to his side office. If you wish, you could use my office to catch up on recent years. Both Hyugas bowed quietly, Hazashi quirking a wry smile at him before both brothers disappeared into the office, the door shutting behind them and their chakra signals disappearing instantly. Sarutobi deactivated the privacy seals but did not summon his Anbu back in as he settled down to work again. He decided to call Haruki back tomorrow. The situation wasn't so desperate that he would need to send the redhead back out when he had just come home. XX. Naruto perked up when a knock sounded. He glanced at the plastic clock on the kitchen wall. His sensei was only half an hour late. He was sure this was some sort of record. Hi sensei. Naruto greeted as he opened his door. Kakashi smiled at him but glanced distractedly next door and the blonde wanted to snicker. Why was his sensei so hung up on talking to Haruki? Haruki-san was taking a nap, Naruto announced as he stepped out of his apartment, closing the door behind him before making his way to his neighbor's apartment. But he told me to knock when you came over. Kakashi accepted this without a word, standing behind him in his usual slouch as Naruto knocked on the door. There was a moment of silence before muffled footsteps approached and the sound of a lock clicking open was heard and the door swung open. Immediately, Kakashi stiffened from his place behind his student as his eye met a pair of clear cerulean. The man had the red hair he had been looking out for and he had high cheekbones and a deceptively delicate facial structure that seemed distantly familiar to him, but it was the eyes that drew his attention in the end. A pair of blue eyes, a mix of sky and ocean that Kakashi had only ever seen on one other person. Sensei. Kakashi blinked and glanced down, breaking eye contact with the other Junin to stare inquiringly at his student even as his mind raced. Even Naruto's eyes weren't quite that shade, though Kakashi supposed that could change when he grew up. Haruki had a shock of red hair that reached past his shoulders, but why was Kakashi's first impression of the man a jolting reminder of Namikaze Minato? Sensei. This is Kazama Haruki, Naruto introduced proudly, and Kakashi absently noted that the blonde had probably never had the opportunity to introduce anyone before. Haruki-san, this is Kakashi-sensei, the one I told you about. A slightly stilted silence descended on them as Naruto looked between the two in confusion. In contrast, Kakashi was caught up in that blue gaze again, but this time, now that the shock had died somewhat, he could see several differences between Haruki and his former sensei. Haruki had a more slender build. He was by no means feminine looking, but the redhead's muscles were subtly defined under his ninja uniform instead of the more solid build Minato had had. Kakashi thought the man should have been tanner as well, since the current paleness of his skin didn't quite seem to suit him and leaned towards unhealthy, especially with the faint bags under Haruki's eyes that one could only see upon closer observation. The eye color was the only similarity to Minato that Kakashi could see at the moment, though now that he looked more closely into them, he could see the dark, haunted shadows lurking in them that not even his sensei had had after the war. Haruki was Kakashi's age. What had he seen that would leave darkness like that in his eyes? Who was this man? Hatake-san. The soft tenor snapped him out of his scrutiny and Kakashi instinctively sent an eye smile at the other Junin. Kazama-san, I'm Naruto's sensei, as I'm sure you've heard. I heard you were talking to my cute students and they seemed to take you word to heart, so I wanted to meet you. Haruki studied him for a moment, head tilting in a considering movement as he leaned against the doorframe. Are you angry? Kakashi blinked. Did he seem angry? He was honestly just curious about the redhead. He sighed inwardly. This was what he got for trying to be straightforward. He should just return to being himself. No doubt, it would tick the other man off in no time. With that thought, he whipped out his orange book, ignoring the groan from Naruto as he flipped it open without reservation. No, he assured cheerfully as he focused on his precious Ika. Just curious. A long silence followed and Kakashi could see Naruto face palming over the top of his book. He could also feel Haruki's stare on him and he glanced up to make sure he hadn't scarred the man too much. Again, he was surprised and could only blink when he caught sight of the definitely fond smile playing on Haruki's lips, a touch of wistfulness now lingering in his eyes. It's nice to meet you, Haruki offered when he saw that he had Kakashi's full, if somewhat bewildered, attention again. The redhead glanced down at Naruto and reached out to ruffle his hair. I've boiled water for ramen. Would the two of you like to join me? Naruto brightened immediately and nodded enthusiastically. Haruki only smiled again and stepped aside to let the blonde in. He glanced questioningly at the copy nin and Kakashi, after a moment of contemplation, nodded. He wasn't in the habit of accepting dinner invitations from near strangers, but there was something soothing about this man's aura that should have put him on alert but only served to relax him instead. Plus, he had wanted to find out more about this man, and there really was no better time than the present. 3/4 of an hour later had both Haruki and Kakashi staring with slightly morbid fascination as Naruto downed his 17th bowl of instant ramen. "Ah, I'm full," the blonde finally announced, sitting back as he set down the now empty bowl. "Finally. You sure you don't want one more?" Haruki and Kakashi glanced at each other, exchanging looks of wry amusement as Naruto pouted at them. In the span of 45 minutes, the two adults had fallen into a quiet sort of camaraderie, exchanging casual words now and then but comfortable when silence fell between them as they listened to Naruto babble about his training in between slurps of ramen. Kakashi didn't think he had ever taken to anyone so quickly, not even Minato, but the redhead didn't seem to mind his reading material when he brought it out for a while during the meal, nor did he seem at all offended when Kakashi pulled his, "I was reading and I was definitely listening to you, but I'm going to pretend I wasn't just to piss you off," routine after Haruki had questioned him on his reasons for being late all the time. Instead, Haruki had only nodded as if Kakashi had actually told the man that he didn't want to talk about it and had promptly done as he wished and changed the subject. But what confused Kakashi the most were the expressions on the redhead's face when Haruki thought the copy nin wasn't looking. When he was supposedly immersed in his Ika, sometimes, out of the corner of his eye, he would see flashes of emotion cross the other Junin's face. A wistful sort of affection several times, even a desperate kind of fear on occasion, and once, the one that alarmed the copy nin more than any of the other expressions, a deep, grieving sorrow when Kakashi had commented offhandedly that he would rather go down fighting than spend any time in a hospital surrounded by nurses who didn't even have the decency to let him keep his reading material while he was there. It had been a joke really, after Naruto had wondered aloud whether or not it would bore him to death if he ever had to spend time in the hospital after a mission. Haruki had flinched minutely at this as if he had been struck, and Kakashi had found himself hastily steering the conversation away after that. "Haruki-san, Team 7 took a photo the other day," Naruto was now saying, already on his feet. "Do you want to see?" The faint half smile that was already becoming familiar to Kakashi appeared on the redhead's face. "Sure. Why don't you go get it while I clear the table?" "K." The blonde scratched his head for a second before smiling sheepishly up at Haruki. "It might take a while. I haven't gotten a picture frame for it yet, so I put it somewhere in my room. Be back soon." With that said, the boy scampered out of the kitchen, his full stomach doing nothing to slow him down. As Haruki stood up to gather the empty plastic bowls of instant ramen, Kakashi rose as well and pulled over the garbage can before giving the man a hand. Haruki looked faintly surprised but nodded a silent thanks instead, and the two worked in silence until the table was cleared. "So what did you say to my students?" Kakashi asked when they moved into the sitting room. He noted the Junin vest thrown over the back of the couch on one end and quickly took the other side of the couch, taking in the katana leaning against the wall in one corner of the room. Haruki shrugged, sitting down as well. "Nothing special. I told them to work together. That working as a team would make them stronger, and that being able to use your teammates' strengths and being able to cover for their weaknesses, as well as letting them do the same for you in return, is a testament to how strong you are." His eyes grew distant. "I told them that pride and arrogance had no place on a team if it got in the way of protecting your teammates. That those would just be weaknesses in the end." Kakashi stared at the redhead until Haruki actually turned to stare back. The copy nin wondered idly if Haruki had Sasuke in mind when he had given that last piece of advice. "You'd make a good sensei," he finally said, not bothering to hide the respect in his voice at the obvious sincerity that had been in Haruki's words. He didn't expect the frown that appeared after he spoke. "I wouldn't," the redhead voiced with quiet certainty. He seemed about to say something else before suddenly closing his mouth again, eyes sharpening, and in the sudden silence, the two Junins heard a faint crash of broken glass next door. Haruki was on his feet and at his door in a flash, Kakashi only a step behind him. Outside, Naruto's door was open and jeering voices could be heard. A sharp crack of skin on skin reached their ears. Got some new things since we last visited, a demon. Trash like you shouldn't waste space like this. It's too good for you. You don't deserve to get your murdering hands on such good merchandise. The man who had spoken bent down to pick up a plate off the ground that hadn't broken yet. He was just about to throw it when steel-like fingers curled around his wrist and, in one decisive twist, broke it without effort. The man screamed, plate slipping from his hand only to be neatly caught as the intruder spun around, clutching his arm and backing up to stand with the other two that had come with him. You bast. The words died in his throat, air freezing in his lungs when he met an icy gaze, pinning all three men in place with cold efficiency. Behind Haruki, Kakashi quickly moved to the blonde crouching wide-eyed in a corner of the apartment, an ugly bruise already blossoming on one cheek. With his lips set in a thin line behind his mask, the copy nin crouched down beside his student, doing a quick scan for any other injuries and breathing a small sigh of relief when he found none. Seeing Naruto's attention completely focused on his red-haired neighbor, Kakashi too turned back to Haruki, staring dispassionately at the three intruders cowering in front of the redhead. He couldn't quite bring himself to pity them. Haruki was currently exuding a frigid rage, tightly reined in, but curiously enough, his body was still relaxed. Moving Naruto to the side, Kakashi just managed to catch a glimpse of the redhead's face and had to suppress a shudder. While Haruki's visage remained deadly still, it was the eyes that seemed to bring the most fear to the men in front of him. Unforgiving and ruthless, the usual cerulean had darkened to a near twilight blue, almost demonic in its nature. Get out. The order, for it could be mistaken for nothing else, had not been shouted, nor had Haruki snarled at them. In that even, calm tone Kakashi had grown used to earlier that evening, the only difference being the impassive steel that now edged his voice. Haruki had the men scrambling for the door, giving the redhead a wide berth. If you or any of your friends ever come back, Haruki's voice, still soft, froze the men in their tracks again as they reached the door. Bottomless Indigo turned to stare at them. I will hunt you down and you will only live long enough to regret every action you ever took against this boy. Haruki held their gazes for a moment longer, letting the promise sink in. And then the redhead blinked and the spell broke, and the men were gone a fraction of a second later, fleeing the apartment building as if the devil itself was at their heels. It might as well have been, Kakashi thought with satisfied amusement, visible eye studying the figure still facing away from them before glancing down at Naruto. The blonde was staring open-mouthed at the redhead, and Kakashi suspected that there might even be stars in the boy's awestruck eyes at the moment. Naruto. Haruki suddenly barked and the blonde jumped from his spot. Why yeah. Do you know what fuinjutsu is? This question was so completely off topic that even Kakashi blinked in confusion for a moment. Naruto scratched his head. No. Doesn't matter. Haruki snapped, finally turning around. The ice had melted from the man's eyes, leaving only a protective ferocity behind. You'll learn one day. For now, I'll maintain the seals on this place. With that said, the redhead stalked out of the apartment, leaving both Naruto and Kakashi to scramble after him. You know fuinjutsu. Kakashi eyed the redhead with new interest as he leaned against Naruto's counter, studying the intricate symbols Haruki was currently writing out with a skilled, steady hand. On Haruki's other side, legs swinging in the air, Naruto was perched on the counter, peering at the redhead's work. The bruise on his face was already fading and Kakashi knew it would be gone by morning. Haruki replied without looking up. I picked it up over the years. It was obvious to Kakashi that Haruki did not want to speak further on the subject, so he dropped it without another word. Perhaps another time. If you know fuinjutsu, Naruto chimed in. How come you can't teach me? Earlier, after the intruders had fled, Haruki had given the blonde a simplified run-through of what fuinjutsu was and what the protection seals he was currently making would do. I could make ones that could set those bastards on fire, Haruki had explained nonchalantly as he glanced at Kakashi, but your sensei over there is duty-bound to protect the citizens of Konoha, so he would have to report me. Kakashi had refrained from asking why Haruki wasn't duty-bound to protect the citizens of Konoha and report himself, and could talk so easily of setting them on fire. The small demonic light in the redhead's eyes when Haruki had mentioned said citizens, as fiercely protective as a mother over her child, had convinced him that Haruki wouldn't care. Frankly speaking, Kakashi wouldn't care either, but he didn't feel like getting a dressing down from the Sandaime, so he had kept quiet. He figured if they ever managed to get to Naruto again, seals would be the least of their problems when he and Haruki got through with them. Naruto had readily agreed to the seals and had been asking questions non-stop since Haruki had started. Haruki paused briefly at the question, brush hovering above the piece of paper for a second before continuing. There are better teachers out there. And I'm not teacher material. Naruto pouted. You gave Sasuke, Sakura-chan, and me. And I, Haruki corrected automatically as Kakashi watched on. And I, Naruto repeated obediently. A lesson before Kakashi-sensei arrived that day. And they both listened. And we've been doing really good on our missions because of your advice. Right, sensei? Kakashi nodded with no small amount of amusement when Haruki reached out and flicked the blonde on the forehead, straightening from the seal as he put down his brush. Doing really well on our missions, duckling. The redhead corrected gently. And like you said, all I did was give you advice. I didn't teach you anything. Naruto only pouted some more, but couldn't stay annoyed when Haruki picked up the small stack of now finished seals. What now? The blonde asked inquisitively, jumping down from the counter. Kakashi followed them, hands stuffed into his pockets. It had been a long time since he had seen a fuinjutsu user at work. Now we just place them around the apartment. The door, of course. They stepped outside and Haruki slapped one on either side of the door, discharging a small amount of his chakra into each of them. The symbols on the paper flashed an electric blue before dissipating from the paper. For a moment, once the paper was removed, the same symbols could be seen on the actual wall of the apartment. They shone brightly in the night before they too disappeared, but Kakashi, extending a tentative hand forward to touch the ordinary-looking wood, could feel the steady hum of power under his fingers. He turned back to Haruki, keeping quiet since he was sure he wouldn't be able to keep the amazement out of his voice if he spoke. Most fuinjutsu users stuck seals, paper and all, to a surface and the chakra placed into it would keep it activated and in place. Kakashi knew of only two other people who could transfer seals directly from paper to the actual object with so little effort, the Yondaime and the Toad Sannin Jiraiya. Did this mean that Haruki was as good as either of them? The way the redhead had spoken about it earlier, Kakashi had thought that Haruki only knew enough to get by. Anyone wanting to do harm will be thrown back before they can get within 10 feet of this doorway, Haruki announced, sounding satisfied. If they don't get a clue the first time and try again, they'll get electrocuted and then thrown back. If they still don't get it, they'll die. Kakashi cut in dryly, arching an eyebrow at the redhead as he listened with growing amusement. Haruki looked highly unimpressed. Fortunately for them, no. I put a transportation component into the seal. They'll be dumped in the Naka River if they try a third time. Kakashi was very grateful for his mask at the moment since he couldn't help the grin that surfaced on his features. As it was, the laughter that no doubt showed on the visible part of his face caught Haruki's attention instead and the redhead smirked in response. Shaking his head, the copy nin pointed out, won't they need to go to the hospital once they get electrocuted? Haruki waved a hand as he headed back inside. When I say electrocuted, I mean that's how I'd like to imagine it in my head. In reality, they'll only get a nasty shock and, if they're smart, go home with mild burns. Otherwise, they'll risk pneumonia. Naka River's still cold this time of the year. And if they try again after that. Haruki stopped, glancing briefly down at Naruto who blinked curiously back up at him before focusing on the copy nin now leaning lazily against the doorframe. I don't think they will. Kakashi's eyes smiled knowingly at Haruki. He had spent almost 2 hours now in the redhead's presence and knew, if nothing else, that Haruki was a very careful man. Careful people were dangerous people since they were prepared for almost anything. They had contingency plans for contingency plans. Haruki glanced sharply at the copy nin before continuing in a steely voice, there is also a gravity component in the seal. It will hold them to the ground until I release them, and by that time, I will know, and I will come and deal with them myself. Kakashi cocked his head, studying the redhead carefully as the man turned to face the nearest window. He had not yet seen Haruki fight, but he imagined it would be both amazing and terrifying. The unyielding resolve in Haruki's voice rang true, and from experience, Kakashi knew men like that were dangerous to face on a good day. They were downright suicidal to go up against on a bad day. His former sensei had been like that, and Kakashi had seen enemy nin literally flee for their lives at the first sight of an enraged Yondaime. Hell, they had run when Minato hadn't been angry. Watching Haruki now though, with the redhead listening attentively to Naruto as his student babbled on excitedly about the first time they had chased Tora around Konoha, actually listening when others would have nodded disinterestedly and tuned the boy out, Kakashi could only wonder why. Naruto had said that he had only met Haruki when the Junin had returned from his mission 5 days ago, and only briefly. Yet, even in the short time Kakashi had interacted with him, Haruki had shown himself to be unnaturally protective of Naruto, threatening intruders and setting up seals for the boy as if it was his responsibility to do so. Hataki-san, Naruto wants to try his hand at activating a seal. His sensei should get his mind out of the gutter and come over and watch. Kakashi blinked and opened his mouth to protest the accusation when he noted the teasing glint in the other Junin's eyes. He closed his mouth again and scoffed quietly, whipping out his book in retribution instead. As Kakashi now expected but still didn't understand, Haruki only smiled fondly at him without a single trace of annoyance marring the expression. Inwardly sighing, the copy nin slipped his book away again and tried not to sulk. It was no fun if the other party didn't get mad, though he couldn't quite muster up any real annoyance towards Haruki for this either. Ma, call me Kakashi. Kakashi drew closer, glancing down at the seal now placed on the coffee table. Hataki-san makes me feel old. You are old, sensei. His student retorted, and Kakashi frowned down at Naruto, about to remind the blonde that Haruki was the same age before glancing back sharply at Haruki again when the redhead chuckled. There was nothing special about the action itself. Naruto had given a witty reply and anyone with a sense of humor would have laughed. It was the sound though. Because for one short, painful, pitiful moment, Kakashi could have sworn it had been Minato standing there, chuckling at something Obito had said. Kakashi stared for a moment too long though and he immediately regretted it when Haruki seemed to realize something had disturbed him. The humor died from his face and his eyes grew wary again. Kakashi hadn't even noticed that the shadows that he had first observed in Haruki's cerulean eyes had lifted sometime during their dinner until now, when they settled back in place like they had never left. Kakashi felt like kicking himself. But Haruki spoke again as if nothing had occurred and his voice was still mild when he replied, "You can call me Haruki then, if you want." Kakashi nodded hesitantly, and then had no more time to think when Naruto, already impatient to begin with, reached out with one hand touched the seal. Before any of them had a chance to react, the seal literally started to smoke before a flash of chakra nearly blinded them and the paper seal promptly disintegrated, along with the part of the table that it had been lying on top of. All three were silent as they stared at the pile of ash and blackened wood on the ground. Was that supposed to happen? Kakashi asked mildly, finally breaking the silence as he glanced sidelong at the other Junin. Haruki's face remained impassive for all of 2 seconds before his lips twitched upwards and amusement entered his features again. Kakashi smiled triumphantly. A smile was better than nothing, especially since he had been responsible for ridding the earlier humor in the first place. As if realizing he wasn't in trouble for damaging the coffee table or getting it wrong, Naruto's face split into an embarrassed grin, rubbing the back of his head. Sorry, Haruki-san. Haruki shrugged. It happens. That was a seal for creating sparks for a campfire. You just put too much chakra into it. Almost as an afterthought, he added, glancing in Kakashi's direction, you could start your team on chakra control exercises. It would help all of them in the long run the sooner they get started on it. Kakashi nodded thoughtfully. I'll get them started tomorrow. Sasuke could do with some training of that sort too, but I think chakra control comes easily to Sakura. Naruto had brightened with the thought of new training and Kakashi was distracted by the hyperactive blonde now trying to wrangle what the exercise would be out of him, so much that he almost missed the look of grim satisfaction that flashed across Haruki's face. Almost, but not quite. Kakashi said nothing though, and filed this new information away into a corner of his mind that he had set aside for all the things that didn't make much sense about Kazama Haruki. He would think on it later. The rest of the evening was spent placing up the seals. When they were finished, Haruki had taken one look at the clock and ordered the blonde to shower and get to bed. Kakashi had snickered quietly on the side when he realized what a mother Haruki could be. The redhead only shot him a dirty look before bidding the blonde goodnight. Now, standing in front of Haruki's apartment door, both with their hands tucked away in pockets, Kakashi glanced at the quiet redhead and decided to try for one more round of questions and answers. He glanced behind him at Haruki's door. "Does your apartment have seals too?" An almost evil grin appeared on the redhead's face for a moment. "Of course, but nowhere near as harmless as the ones I put on Naruto's place. If you had come to my door with the intention to do me serious harm, the seals would have electrocuted you 6 ways to Sunday. And yes, this time, when I say electrocuted, I mean electrocuted." Kakashi tried not to look too disturbed as he edged away from the seemingly innocent-looking doorway. They fell into a companionable silence again, and Kakashi wondered if Haruki knew he wanted to ask the redhead questions and that was the reason he wasn't being ordered to go home just yet. Deciding to simply speak his mind, he thought back to Naruto and decided to start with his student. "Not that I think it's a bad thing, but why are you helping Naruto so much?" Haruki tilted his head just enough to observe him out of the corner his eyes. "Why shouldn't I? He's 12, he lives alone, and his place gets broken into every other week. What kind of person would I be if I didn't help him?" Kakashi said nothing, wondering if his student's place really did get broken into every other week, and if so, how Haruki would know about it. "You broke someone's wrist," Kakashi reminded dryly. "That's a lot of anger for someone as calm as you are." Haruki snorted. "You wouldn't believe the temper I had when I was young." "Young, not younger," Kakashi noted. "I used to get annoyed at everything, though I calmed down pretty quickly too, probably because of my short attention span." "Not anymore though." "No," Haruki agreed, and something weary and strained entered his expression as he turned his gaze onto the night sky. "Not anymore. I used up most of my anger a long time ago." Kakashi frowned but let the matter go. Haruki would probably clam up if he pushed it any further. "You didn't report me for breaking a civilian's wrist." Haruki was staring at him out of the corner of his eyes again. Kakashi snorted. "Even if I wanted to report you, do you really think the Sandaime is going to do anything about it? He can't watch Naruto all the time, but he treats him like his own grandson. He'd be furious with the civilians." Haruki nodded in agreement. "True enough." Kakashi contemplated his next thought for a moment before asking, "Do you want to join our training session tomorrow? Naruto would be happy and I'm sure Sasuke and Sakura would be happy to see you too." Haruki cast a dubious look at him. "Sasuke? Really? Well, maybe not happy," Kakashi amended. "Interested. Not grumpy. Could definitely care less. You can pick." Haruki's mouth tilted up in another small smile but shot him a suspicious look this time. "I hope you're not trying to pawn your students off on me, Hitaki. I already told you I'm not teacher material." Kakashi attempted a mildly offended countenance. "I would never try to pawn my cute little students off on anyone." The humor in his eye faded somewhat. "But I don't agree that you wouldn't be a good teacher." Haruki arched an eyebrow at him. "You've never seen me teach." Kakashi stared pointedly at him. "Not an hour ago, you just explained basic Fuinjutsu theory in a simple but clear enough way that even Naruto understood it." A sharp glance was thrown his way. "Naruto will become great at Fuinjutsu." The absolute certainty in Haruki's voice threw Kakashi a little, but he managed to reply lightly, careful not to let his tone be mistaken for mockery. "Got all that after he put a hole through his own coffee table, huh?" As he hoped, a slight smile appeared on the redhead's face again and the tension that had gripped the man's shoulders released its hold. "I'll think about it," Haruki finally allowed. "I think the Hokage will want me to report to him in the morning to discuss my recent mission. I've been resting long enough. But I'll see if I can come by sometime afterwards." Kakashi nodded but couldn't quite help asking one last thing. "You haven't really been in Konoha for the past week, have you?" He got an impassive stare for his troubles but didn't stop pushing. His ego was on the line here, damn it. "I'm a tracker. My dogs are trackers. We're the best. But I couldn't find you, which means that you weren't here. Right." Another heartbeat of silence and then soft clear laughter rang out in the night air, brilliant in its genuineness. On the outside, Kakashi was stunned as he watched the face in front of him come truly alive for the first time since he had met this man. On the inside, he was downright thunderstruck. If he had any doubts before, they were all gone now. This Kazama Haruki, whoever he was, had Minato's laugh. The copy nin couldn't quite help the smile that curved his lips as his posture relaxed again. He didn't care what anyone said. Haruki was not a Junin sent to Kumo as a spy 8 years ago. He didn't know the real story and he definitely planned to find out, but even with all the secrets Haruki coveted, Kakashi also knew he could trust this man. There was no way the redhead could be an enemy nin, not if he could laugh like that in the presence of someone he had known for all of 2 hours. And yeah, it hurt a little to hear Minato's laugh come from this strange shinobi, but that feeling was dying even as he thought this. Instead, he found himself wondering what had happened to Haruki for the redhead to lock away this laughter, this happiness, what had happened to hide this man away so that Kakashi was only now getting a glimpse of what Haruki might have been or could have been, and what it would take to draw this man out again, and to keep him here instead of hidden away behind the distant, melancholic, weary soldier that Kakashi had first met. But for now, this was enough, and as Haruki's laughter died away, fading to a contented smile instead, Kakashi only smiled back lightly. So does that mean you weren't in Konoha? Haruki grinned and headed into his apartment. Good night, Kakashi. I'll see you around. Kakashi raised a lazy hand. Night then. Come by training grounds 7 if can. A nod and then the redhead disappeared, door closing quietly behind him. Kakashi remained motionless for a while longer before heading towards his own home, his steps lighter than usual, even for a shinobi. That had been an interesting evening. He could honestly say he had not had so much fun in a very long time. He absently wondered if Haruki would ask him over for dinner again. Maybe he could bring Sasuke and Sakura too. That would be all of Team 7. As he continued to muse over the things he had learned that night and made plans for tomorrow's training, Kakashi didn't notice that his mind had already unconsciously placed Haruki with their team.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.